Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that, Glenn. So yes, we are the Office of the City Clerk, the Election Division. My name is Renee McDade, and I'm an election administrator that oversaw the 2021 Neighborhood Council elections. Joining me today is my colleague, Michael Lectoric, Lene Basulto, and Nathan Singh with the City Clerk's Office. Thank you all for joining me and supporting me today. We also, of course, as you can see, have our colleagues that we work very closely with throughout the season, Tom Soon and John Darnell. Thank you both for being here today. And then lastly, I would like to give a special thank you to Glenn, not only for being our steward today, but for being someone that has provided us with wonderful and great input throughout this whole election season, even with the NC work group coming out of the 2019 elections, where we were able to implement some of those things. You've always been a support of us throughout this season. You've given us great ideas. And I just today want to acknowledge you and give you a very special shout out and thank you for that, Glenn. So thank you for supporting us today as well. So with no further ado, happy Congress Day. I hope you all are enjoying all of the sessions and the speakers and all the wonderful information that we've gotten today. I know I have. And then we would also like to thank you, thank everyone who participated in the 2021 Neighborhood Council elections, whether you ran as a candidate, if you voted in the elections, assisted with the election process in some way, such as distributing paper applications, supporting people, encouraging people to come out and vote, or just if you provided election information. So for today's agenda, we're gonna, number one, we're gonna talk about, give you just everything that kind of happened with the election. We'll go over some of the information we got from the feedback sessions, and then, kind of give you an idea of where we are in terms of, what things are going to look like in the future. So today we will show you a video of the NC election highlights for the 2021 neighborhood council elections. We'll take a look at the election statistics and the voter turnout information. We'll compare candidate and voter statistics for 2019 versus 2021, provide information on the upcoming NC election work group opportunity, and then lastly, we'll open the floor for any feedback that you all have for us. So with that, in the fall of 2020, due to the public health and safety concerns during the COVID-19 pandemic, rather than cancel the 2021 NC elections, our office brainstormed on safe ways to conduct 91 elections with varying stakeholder requirements, ballot styles, and voting methods. Ultimately, the City Council adopted a motion directing us to conduct the 2021 Neighborhood Council elections entirely by mail instead of traditional at-poll elections. So we quickly developed a vote by mail portal for voters to request ballots. We partnered with community-based organizations to provide election applications and information. We established an agreement with the County of Los Angeles to use their ballot drop boxes, and we created various candidate and voter FAQs and instructional videos to assist you all with participating in our elections. So before we begin with our PowerPoint presentation, we would like to share a short video with some highlights from the 2021 NC election cycle.
Every 2 years, the Office of the City Clerk conducts up to 99 Neighborhood Council board member elections. But for the first time in 100 years, a global pandemic brought the world to a halt and altered the way we work and how we serve. In order to keep the community safe and adhere to statewide safety measures, it was decided that for the first time ever, the NC elections would be conducted entirely by mail. This was going to pose a challenge to assist hundreds of candidates and thousands of vote-by-mail voters in a safe and remote way. Therefore, the City Clerk elections and systems teams created custom candidate applications and documents online, by fax, and through the mail. Staff provided multilingual support over the phone, via email, and even via 1,700 candidates, and processed over 26,000 vote-by-mail ballot applications. The city clerk partnered with community organizations to place over 77 vote-by-mail application display boxes at counters for stakeholders to obtain a paper application if they did not have internet or printer access. In addition, the city clerk was able to partner with the Los Angeles Registrar Recorder to use ballot drop boxes across the city as an alternative to mailing in a ballot and increased accessibility to voters. Finally, ballots were scanned to provide updates to voters through the portal, and in an effort to increase transparency, the tally process was live streamed for the public to view. Time and time again, the city clerk family proves we are resourceful, we are problem solvers, we are a team, and we are here to serve the stakeholders of the city of Los Angeles.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. Okay, so in response to multiple requests for voter turnout information, we created an infographic with election statistics for candidates, voters, ballots, and various outreach efforts. We also posted voter turnout information by neighborhood council, regions, and citywide to our website. The voter turnout information includes number of vote-by-mail applications received, incompleted, and processed, as well as the number of ballots mailed and returned. You can go to our website to view that information. Now let's take a closer look at the candidate statistics for 2019 versus 2021. This graph provides a comparison of candidates in all 12 regions. In total, we certified over 1,700 candidates for the 2021 neighborhood council elections. Candidate turnout numbers for all regions are as follows. There were 91 NCs with 1,217 board seats up for election citywide in 2021. 1,706 candidates were certified in the 91 NCs, and this is an increase of approximately 3% of candidates from 2019. Regions 3, 5, 11, and 12 had the biggest increase in candidates this year. 15 NCs used the board affirmation process to seat their certified candidates on their boards. Now, taking a look at the voter statistics for 2019 versus 2021, in total, we received and processed approximately 27,000 online vote-by-mail applications and received close to 20,000 voted ballots citywide. Voter turnout numbers for all regions are as follows. During this cycle, the city clerk mailed out a total of 26,822 ballot packets. Our office received 17,577 ballot packets, which were included in the tally. This was a decrease of 7% in voter turnout from 2019. Now, we will divide the feedback session into this session into 5 sections: bylaws and election handbook, candidate filing, vote by mail, election challenges, and tally election results. This past August, we partnered with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to host 4 regional feedback sessions and a Board of Neighborhood Commissioners Town Hall meeting to obtain feedback from NC board members and stakeholders regarding the elections. Let's begin by focusing on the bylaws and the election handbook. The most feedback we received related to the handbook was the stakeholder definition listed in the NC bylaws should mirror the definitions used in our NC portals. Stakeholders would like candidate guidelines and challenge requirements expanded to address campaign and social media postings. And the NC election handbook should have section titles in their table of contents hyperlinked to go directly to the section pages. So in response to the feedback received, the city clerk will work with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment and NCs to suggest language amendments in their bylaws to ensure consistency with our NC portals. We'll expand on candidate guidelines and challenge requirements to address negative campaigning, social media posts, and free speech. And we'll reformat the NC election handbook to make it easier to access information. So now I would like to open the floor for any feedback that you all have, any additional feedback that you may have on this topic. If you would like to provide feedback or recommend changes, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom, or you can press *9 if you are calling in by phone. So let's see.
So this is regarding bylaws and the election handbook. We will be going through all the rest of the topics sequentially.
That's correct. Okay, so we have Pamela Gibberman. Can we unmute? Can she unmute herself? Okay, Pamela, are you there?
Yes, you have to put up a button. I don't have a mute or an unmute. So you have to make that available when somebody needs to speak. My comment is about once the applications are filed, so this may not be the appropriate time.
Okay, we'll call on you again, Pamela, when we get to that section.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Does anyone else have any questions or feedback or recommendations for NC bylaws or the election handbook?
Renee, let me just jump in here and just acknowledge, because I think this will be helpful to everybody,
okay,
that the city clerk during the last 2 election cycles put out a draft of the handbook the previous fall and provided neighborhood councils a 30-day period to review and provide comments on the handbook. And I just wanted to make sure, I assume you'll be doing that again upcoming prior to the next election cycle. And so I do think it's important for folks to know about that and take advantage of that opportunity to review the draft, in that time frame.
That is correct, Glenn. That is something that we will probably continue to do for future elections. It is important that we have our NC leaders and stakeholders take a look at that handbook to see if there are things in there that they feel we could either expand upon or clarify. And again, we made quite a bit of updates in 2021 to that election handbook because of the feedback we received from the community. What I will say about NC bylaws, one of the teams that we're developing in this off season is to work with NCs where there may be inconsistencies in their bylaws in terms of Article 5, which lists the board seat titles and requirements versus what is listed on the attachment B. Generally, we default to the language and the requirements on the attachment B in the NC bylaws, but there are times where the information conflicts. And so one thing we are going to do during this downtime is we'll be reaching the election administrators for your NCs. Will reach out to you. They will provide you with suggested language so that any inconsistencies, any language that needs to be clarified, or we need to ensure that we're interpreting it properly, we will be working with you all during the off season so that, and our hope is that when we go into the 2023 NC election season, we won't have any issues dealing with how to interpret your bylaws, certify your candidates, and process your voters. So, okay, so with that, I don't see any hands, so let's move on to the next subject. Okay, let me see, I think you need to go back one. Yes, there we go. Okay, so we will now move on to candidate filing. These are some of the suggestions we have received for this subject. Extend the candidate filing deadline time from 5 p.m. to 11:59 p.m. Indicate maximum size for the candidate photos to make uploading them easier. And a lot of folks felt that the two-step process to upload required documentation was too cumbersome and should be changed to a single step. So what I will say is that extending the filing deadline time to 11:59 p.m. is very difficult for varying reasons, and would also require overtime funding for support staff to assist stakeholders during those after hours. Our office will need to reassess this request once our final budget for the fiscal year 22-23 is approved, to see if we can accommodate this request. We will also work with our systems team to indicate a maximum photo size in the candidate filing portal to make uploading photos easier, as well as discussing reducing the steps to upload required documentation. That's something that our systems team would have to let us know if that's possible, and try to streamline that process as much as possible. So again, if you would like to provide feedback or recommendations on the candidate filing process, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom or press *9 if you are using your phone.
I think this Pamela's question fit into this topic area, I believe.
Okay, so can we allow Pamela to speak first? Pamela, are you there?
Yes, thank you for putting the button up so I could unmute. So our problem in the Panorama City Neighborhood Council was we had about 6 potential applicants who, for whatever reason, their application was incomplete. And we never were able to reach out to them. We got no information about them. So my suggestion for next year is, when the deadline is approaching and you are seeing that X number of applicants have not completed their application, that you reach out to them and offer assistance with whatever things are missing from the application. And if you are unable to do that, please, can you reach out to the appropriate neighborhood council and their election committee, so that we would have the opportunity to reach out to them and help them complete their application, so that we would in fact have the opportunity to work with them on our council, because they will be able to participate fully in the election process rather than being left in limbo. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback, Pamela. I appreciate that. Okay, next we have Assad. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, this is Assad Al-Najjar from Portal Ranch. Good morning, all. For the candidate filing, I think you heard my comment a few times, and I would like to repeat it here on the record. During the Portal Ranch Neighborhood Council elections, we had one of the candidates file for candidacy with the fraudulent documents. We brought it to the attention of the city clerk and for investigation immediately. However, it was not being investigated. The candidate went along to the ballot, and then through the ballot and the challenge, we gave enough evidence. However, the city clerk failed to acknowledge the fraud documents submitted, and hopefully in the future that you would take seriously when the neighborhood council bring to your attention that there is fraud, that you take more measures to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you, Assad. Thank you for your comments and your feedback. Okay, next we have Kevin. Hi, Kevin, are you there?
Yes, I am. So one, thank you very much for this presentation. You know, I'm definitely sympathetic as someone who works at a public agency when you mentioned things like extending the candidate filing to 11:59 will require more resources. So there are, you know, obviously budgetary considerations, but I just kind of want to state, I guess, as an overarching theme is that a request like that is actually, you know, a relatively small request budgetary wise, because you're looking for what, a couple extra staff for one day of the year. But a kind of a broader theme in the neighborhood council process, as I navigate it as both a candidate and eventually an elected official, was that there was often a lot of rhetoric around like, this is the democratic process, you know, get involved, be involved in your neighborhood, but there actually weren't sufficient resources allocated to ensure a legitimate democratic process. I know the previous caller mentioned, you know, verification of materials and fraudulent documents. That's, you know, the case in more than one neighborhood council. So I guess I would really just urge the city clerk to think about making sure that you can advocate for the resources you need to run a legitimate and participatory democratic process through the neighborhood council system. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Kevin. Okay.
Renee, you might want to comment on the 3 days at following the candidate filing deadline in terms of, you know, that time period to get the required documentation. And then also maybe comment on the fact it's not just the filing happens 12 times, filing deadline. Okay.
Right. Okay. I'll wait till we finish our comment and I'll respond to that. Thank you, Glenn. Okay. Next, Maureen. Good morning, Maureen. Are you there? Can you unmute yourself, Maureen?
I did.
Okay. Good morning.
Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yes.
Hi. I was actually a candidate for a seat in the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council for the community interest seat. And I was wondering why online it indicated that a candidate withdrew from the community interest seat, but ended up on the ballot, which diluted the votes. And I did not realize this until after the election in terms of being able to protest the vote. So when someone is, you know, drops out, then the ballot should indicate that.
Okay. Is that your comment?
Well, that's my comment, and I'd like to have some input from you guys as to what one is supposed to do when that happens. When one is a candidate and there was a candidate and that candidate should not have been on the ballot. I guess I just wanted some follow-up with you guys.
Okay, I'll respond to your comment once we're done with everyone's feedback. Okay. Next we have Pamela. Can you unmute yourself?
I already spoke. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. So thank you everyone for all of your feedback. So yes, responding to Assad concerns, we oftentimes have candidates eligibility to run challenged. And our process is that the person challenging the candidate must supply or submit documentation that proves that that candidate is not eligible to run. What we do in our office is we review that documentation, and if it does not provide evidence of the person's ineligibility, then that challenge is not upheld. I'm very familiar with your case, Assad. I know that you've attended a lot of our regional feedback sessions. And, you know, I think that this is something, if you like, we can definitely take offline and speak with you about this directly. But that is our process for addressing challenges. And again, we take that information that is provided to us, we review it thoroughly, and then we make a determination based upon that. For the 11:59 deadline filing deadline time. So as Glenn mentioned, yes, we have 12 regions. And so that would mean that we would be required on, on those occasions, and it would not only be the candidate filing deadline, it would also be the candidate documentation time. So when you file a candidate application, you have 3 days to provide the supporting required documentation. So essentially there would be 24 deadlines that would be extended throughout the election cycle. And it would be quite a few staffs from different sections having to stay late and support candidates. And the reason why we have to do that is because we oftentimes will receive calls on that last day where someone needs a question answered. Maybe they're having trouble with the portal, uploading documents, unsure about the documents that are required. And so we always ensure that we are available to address those issues while that filing deadline is open. If we are not on staff and they encounter problems and that deadline pass, it may mean that we are unable to certify certain candidates simply because we were just not there to support them. It would also require just not staff from our division, but then it would also require staff from our systems division as they support us when we encounter issues with the portal or glitches with the portal. And so that is why, it would require a lot of resources to support that. For a candidate, for those candidates that have incomplete applications, it is our policy to reach out to them and try to reach them. Sometimes we're not successful. We will send an email through our portal. That's an automatic system that we use. And then we will oftentimes follow up with a phone call as well. And sometimes we're just not able to reach them. But I do think that that is a very good suggestion that we also let the neighborhood councils know. Oftentimes you are able to reach stakeholders a little bit easier than we are. You may be familiar with them if they are perhaps your colleagues or people you've encouraged to run. And so I think that's a great idea. So that's something we can definitely, I think do and partner with the NCs in the future on that. Okay. Is there anything else? Did I miss anything? Did I get everybody's?
Could I just jump in? Is it possible you could, regarding the 11:59 p.m. idea, would it be possible to disclose very clearly on the website and other locations that the office is only open till 5, but as a convenience, people can file till 11:59? In other words, there won't be anyone there to assist them if they have technical difficulties. They have to do that during, until 5 p.m. But for those that, are self-sufficient to file at the, until then, is that an option?
I think that's something we could definitely look at. I mean, we would have to say that, staff will only be available to support you up until 5 p.m. If you experience any issues between 5 p.m. and 11:59 p.m., we may not have staff on board to assist you. And I think, in that case, that will cause other issues, because then people will say, well, I filed in the allotted time, but because you weren't there, to support me or to assist me, I don't think it's fair that I cannot be certified. So I think we would have to definitely take a look at that closer. I don't think it's something we will automatically rule out. We'll take a look at that, consider the pros and cons. And I think that's, something that we can even probably talk about in the NC work group, just to kind of get everybody's ideas and feelings about that. But one thing, either way, whether we go with a 5 p.m. filing deadline time or a 11:59, what we will do is make sure that information is prominently displayed across all platforms, not only just on our website, on our forums, in the portal. Also, as we're partnering and working with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, with the NCs, with the candidates, just making sure that that is repeated, constantly, and ensuring that we inform folks whenever we give out information to make sure that they include that deadline time as they're passing out information. I definitely think that's something that we could do better the next go round. Okay.
And I do see Maureen's hand is up. I don't know if that's from before or up again.
I think she put it up again. Is that correct, Maureen? Do you have another question or feedback for us? You want to unmute yourself, Maureen? Are you there? No.
She's unmuted on our side.
Okay. Okay, so Maureen, we'll come back to you if you have feedback for us.
Let
Let
me
me
Okay.
unmute her again, just to try.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a glitchy there.
Okay.
Hold on one second.
All
Okay,
right.
so I'm allowed to talk.
Oh, okay. John, it's okay. She put it in the chat. I see it. My apologies, Maureen. That is correct.
Okay.
You asked about the withdrawn candidate. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for reminding me. So this is also an issue that we've had with some NCs where, so the way it works, there is a deadline to officially withdraw as a candidate. There is an official deadline for that for every region. And the reason why there is a deadline is because at that point, we move forward with producing our ballots. So what will happen sometimes is we will have some candidates that will decide to withdraw after our ballots have been printed. And so at that point, that's why we have the deadline. If you withdraw before that filing deadline, your name, and if you withdraw officially through our office, your name will be removed from the certified candidates list and your name will not appear on that ballot. But sometimes we do have candidates that throughout the process decide that they no longer want to run and be a candidate. And at that point, it is too late for our office to remove their name from the ballot. And so when they contact our office, because sometimes they don't always do that, they make a decision, they may let the NC know, or people may hear, by word of mouth, but if they do contact our office and that deadline date has passed, we encourage them to update their candidate photo and their statement rather, to say that they are no longer interested in running. So those that may go on the website to learn more about the candidates will see that and will know not to vote for them. Our man, I tell you, our timeline, Maureen, I tell you, our timeline is so tight. It's like walking a tightrope, believe me. And those that have participated in our NC work group understands that we count every single day. And it's just really, really hard for us to delay our ballot printing process any further, because you have to remember that for each region, we could have anywhere from, not 7, 8, 9 to up to 12 NCs in that one region. And we're doing that on a rolling basis over like a 6-month period. And so it is really hard for us. Again, we are going to look at our election timeline again with our NC work group. Maybe you can join, you can apply to participate and to try to understand that a little bit better. But I can just tell you for now, it's a very tight timeline, but definitely something we'll look at. Okay. All right. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any. You're very welcome, Maureen. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions for that. So I think we will move on to vote by mail. Okay, so moving on to the vote by mail process. I know that this is a big one. So some of the comments we received for this topic was that the online vote by mail application was difficult for the unhoused and the digitally challenged stakeholders to use, and that we should allow in-person voting for these stakeholders. The ballot drop boxes were a great option. However, NCs would like to be involved with selecting the ballot drop box for their NC, and most NCs would like to keep the option of voting by mail in addition to at-poll voting to increase accessibility for voters to participate in NC elections. So of course, our hope is that this pandemic will be behind us in 2023, and we will be able to return to traditional at-poll elections to better accommodate stakeholders without access to digital technology. Our office will include voting by mail as an option in our 22-23 department budget. And if vote by mail is offered in 2023, it will include the VBM portal and the use of ballot drop boxes. We will consult with the NCs on their preferred location. So if you would like to provide feedback or recommendations on this topic, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom or press *9 if you're using the phone. Okay, it looks like we have up first, Josh. You would like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Josh Stuckman, Los Feliz. First big thing with the portal was having the two-step registration. So you register first to use the portal and then register again to vote was a poor system. You see a drop-off anytime that you have people jump through multiple hoops. Also, not having broader promotion of that voter portal meant that it was hard to convince people of legitimacy. These are kind of well-known issues in vote-by-mail elections, and I would like to see in the future more attention paid to the issues that are common to vote-by-mail elections. This is already an office where it has low public knowledge, low public sense of legitimacy. There's a hesitancy to put information into online forms. Just would like to see that massively streamlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, next we have Stacy. Good morning, Stacy. Are you there?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I wanted to echo what was just said sort of about the perception of legitimacy. I found that when I was talking to my neighbors about voting, first, they didn't know elections were happening. And so when I was explaining the election process to them, they were sort of hesitant to get on board, not because they don't want to be involved, but because they were just kind of like, this is something I've never heard of. And then, as you mentioned, the online ballot selection process being kind of cumbersome, but particularly if you didn't grow up in sort of an era of technology like I did. I'm a little bit on the younger spectrum of most candidates and voters. So to me, all of this online submission process is kind of par for the course for anything I want to do. But especially for my older neighbors and constituents, this was something that seemed very odd to them to have to do just to participate in the democratic process. I'm wondering, because I did have a constituent who was so worried about putting her personal information online, so she applied for the paper ballot, but then didn't get it in time to vote. So I'm wondering if we could just look into making the paper ballot applications compulsory for mail-in elections. You get all of that information, you get the ballot automatically. You don't have to go ask for one every election cycle. We have at least for residential voters versus, I guess, business or community interest, we at least know the addresses of where people can vote. I'm wondering if we can't just not the ballots, but automatically mail out the ballot applications so people get that hard copy early on, know there's an election happening, and then have an analog way to participate.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Kevin?
Sorry, before Kevin speaks, could I just jump in and just say, part of this is a function of the budget that the city gives to the city clerk's office, and also the responsibility of how much, what's the role of neighborhood councils. Right. And so some neighborhood councils did do mailers to all of their stakeholders, which included exactly what you're mentioning, that voter application form, and some did not. So I think that's a two-step process. Seeing how much money the city clerk is allocated for something when you're talking about a city this large with that many potential stakeholders. And of course, there are people qualified not just because they live, but also because they work on property or they're community interest stakeholders. But I think personally, I think part of the role is for neighborhood councils to step up to more neighborhood councils step up to the plate to help get those voter application forms out, because some neighborhood councils did a better job than others. Let me just say that. And so I don't have to speak up again. Renee, perhaps you could touch on after the other people have spoken. Discuss about people getting the turnaround time for people to get their ballots. So since you print the ballots, well in advance, then the issue is just processing the vote by mail applications. And did they come in? And they had to be in a week early. The turnaround time to process them. My personal experience was good in that I got my ballot the day after, 2 days after I submitted my application. So, but I know others. I've heard the reports of delayed ballots. So maybe you could address that after the other folks have spoken. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Glenn. Okay, Kevin?
Yes, thank you. I would echo, so actually let me disclose, I'm part of the Downtown LA Neighborhood Council, recently elected, but I would echo some of the concerns mentioned by the other callers, but also just wanted to kind of restate what I previously stated, which is that it's great that people got vote by mail options, but it was very challenging getting people to buy into that, given that it operates outside of the typical elections process. And so the whole thing, from a new voter perspective to the neighborhood council system sounds a little hinky. And I think we need to just kind of acknowledge that there's like a more structural issue here, which is that this is not actually tied to the normal election system. And the consequence of that is that a lot of voters are not, empowered to vote in these elections, and they're not aware of them. So I think in the long term, we need to start thinking about how do we shore up the system so that we can ensure maximum participation and add the legitimacy that other city council elections, have, where all registered voters receive a ballot, et cetera. And I know there are complications because of the age limits, but that still wouldn't preclude including all registered voters. So just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Kevin. Thank you all for your feedback. Yeah, I think that hits it on the head on the nail, right, Kevin? I mean, folks can only participate when they know about neighborhood councils to begin with, right? Let alone the elections for the board members. And I think that part of that, like Glenn mentioned, is going to require that NCs do, and of course, partnering with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, get the word out, try to find a way to inform neighborhoods about these councils and what they do and the value they bring to the community and how it could work for them. I know, and maybe this is something that Dunn can speak on a little later, but I know they are working on an NC awareness survey to send out to start that process. And like Glenn said, I think also making sure that we try to find a way where if we have some NCs that are, doing mailers and other things that help their voters and their constituency, perhaps, Dunn can implement that as a best practice that all NC, a model that all NCs could use. And maybe be required to do. I don't know, but that's something more I know that's kind of on the outreach side, and perhaps maybe later on Tom and Darnell will share some of the things that they do to help with that. But yes, again, the two-step process, I know that is something that is very cumbersome. We got a lot of feedback about that. From my understanding, I know that from what little bit I know about the system side of the portal, that initial account is to establish your email address. That process verifies that the email address is active and is correct. And then I know from there you're able to go in and put your applications in. If that something that we can reduce down into one step, I am not sure, but it is definitely something that we're taking to the table with our systems team. We're going to discuss that with them because we did receive a lot of feedback about that. And I could see how it would be off-putting and perhaps, have some folks just give up on the process because it's not easy to do. And so that is definitely on our radar. Also, we understand, our folks that are maybe seniors or a little older or just, is not very comfortable or know how to use digital technology. We recognize that this election was very hard for them. Unfortunately, we were not able to do any in-person voting. We were, mandated by an executive order from the mayor that we were not to go out and have community events. And so our hands were really tied, and we really recognized that folks were affected by that. And so again, our hopes is that, 2023, we will be in a situation where we are definitely able to return to those traditional elections. And let me see what else. And so the process for the ballot. So once you're in the vote by mail portal, once you submit your application, we will review your application, ensure that you meet the requirements. And if so, we will see which ballots you're eligible to receive for that NC election. And then what we do is we put the ballot packet mailer together for you. And then we go over to the post office and drop our mail bins there directly. And then the post office mail, of course, deliver those ballots to our voters. And then our voters receive those ballot packets. They vote their mail, put it in the postage paid envelope, a return envelope, of course, sign it like you would do in traditional elections, the back of your vote by mail envelope. And then you could either return it to us by mail, or we have drop boxes that you could return them in by election day. And so, yes, I've heard from one end of the spectrum to the other. Cases where Glenn, in his case, where he was able to request that application, get his ballot immediately and return it to us. And then we've also heard where it took a little longer for other folks. And then we also had people tell us that they received their ballots after the election was over. And so we do recognize that, there's a lot of issues going on with the post office. Our office did work with them throughout this season, and we're going to also work with them again once during this off season to see what it is that we can do to ensure maybe faster mail delivery service. Of course, the closer you wait to the deadline, which is 7 days out from election day, to submit a vote by mail application, you had up until 7 days before the election. But again, remember, the closer you get to that, we usually will mail that ballot out that next day, and then it would go to you. But again, that also makes a difference in you receiving your ballot on time. Yes, Glenn? You had a comment,
Yeah.
Glenn?
Yes, just before we leave this topic,
Okay.
I just, since I've been involved for a while, I remember back when the vote by mail was an optional add-on back 2012 elections and prior. And that was done when the Department of Neighbor Empowerment ran the elections, but also I think before that when city clerks started off with their experimental session. Was it 2008 or 2010?
2008, yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
So neighborhood councils at that time had an option in addition to the in-person polling place voting. They had an option where they could opt in for vote by mail. And I do recall in the latter two of those cycles that neighborhood councils, and it's probably related to the Great Recession financial challenges of the city, but they could then, if they opted in, they paid $500 for the first increment of vote by mail ballots, and then there would be a charge after that. And I do know that some neighborhood councils took advantage of that, and some neighborhood councils had quite a healthy percentage of folks participating in vote by mail. It was like maybe 30 to 40% of their vote by mail, of their total voters opted for vote by mail. And that was back then, and now more and more people are using vote by mail as a regular election, as more of a matter of a course. So I'm only sharing this partly because the history for the folks who didn't know that, yes, it did exist before the pandemic, but also I would not want vote by mail just thrown out because maybe the city clerk wasn't given adequate funding for it. Because if neighborhood councils felt strongly that they wanted to have that for their neighborhood council election, and they felt strongly enough to financially support it, that maybe that might allow you to then, do that for those neighborhood councils. So I would like for you to consider that as, an option, an alternative way if you're not provided adequate funding to do it citywide. Thank you.
So going back to mailing ballots, automatically mailing ballots, that is a feedback and a recommendation that we hear in all of our feedback sessions. Why is that not something that you're able to do? And there are several reasons for that. And as mentioned, there are other stakeholders, not just our residents, but, of course, those, owning property, owning business, our community interest stakeholders. And so we want to make sure that we're being equitable for everyone and not, just for one type of stakeholder. But even in addition to that, we also have our requirements, to vote. And so not only it just being a budget thing to send ballots to, all of these households where we don't know if they're eligible to vote, if they're, if they're a resident perhaps, but there are even, some rules that you have to look at in bylaws where you still may have to meet additional requirements. But also it's, in order for them to receive a ballot, we have to first make sure that they are eligible to receive that. And we do that through receiving that vote by mail application. And so, we do have to take a look at, how we, expend our resources. We do have a very tight budget. And so, it's something we will look at, but I know just from experience of our elections and how we run them, that is something that, may be difficult to do, but definitely something that's worth to look at. And even if it's just maybe making sure everyone receives some sort of FAQ along with a vote by mail application. I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is to that, but I know that that is something that, folks would really like to see us do. And we'll definitely take a look at that during the downtime. And I recognize the comment that about, making sure that these elections are looked upon as, our regular elections to elect our city council members and on to our local and federal and state elections and legitimizing them. I agree with all of that. And I hope that that is something that we could try to work with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to elevate neighborhood councils, so that it is a common household thing. People do recognize them, the work that they do, and try to start supporting them and participating in them. Okay, so I think we have some more hands raised. I think Kevin, you had your hand raised first. Go ahead.
Yes. So I appreciate that, your comment on that you guys are committed to an equitable system, which is, why there are concerns about tying it to voter registration. But I'd say a counterpoint is that it's also not equitable that the neighborhood council system really gives property owners and business owners privilege in being represented in the government. And it already kind of violates that one person, one vote principle. You don't get a different vote in a city council district, on the basis of being a business owner. And so I'm not sure why that's necessarily should be the case in an equitable neighborhood council system. So just wanted to kind of leave that food for thought.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Josh?
Yeah, one thing that came up that seemed like could have been an easy fix. We were told that you could only use the drop boxes for our region, but because we, again, Los Feliz are on the borders of several other regions, why not let people put them in any of the drop boxes, have them all mailed back, and you guys sort them out as they come in?
Okay, got it. Stacy? Good morning, are you there?
Thank you again. I just wanted to really agree with and emphasize what Kevin said about who neighborhood stakeholders are, who has a voice, and just, the notion that business and property owners get like multiple voices in multiple districts depending on how widespread their assets are. But residents who don't own property or businesses, I mean, Sherman Oaks is a lot of renters, myself included, because I'm from the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council. Not that I don't think they shouldn't get to be involved in meetings and have a voice, but equity was brought up, and I also just want to clarify that I think that I was suggesting before that ballot applications be compulsory to addresses that we know could potentially reach eligible voters. I understand why it wouldn't make sense for ballots, how it works in the system. But if there were ballot applications mailed, assuming that would be something we could budget for, which is really disheartening hearing budget concerns with regards to elections, because I feel like this is like the lifeblood of our system. And if we can't have like really truly accessible free elections, like what else are we going to be able to have in our communities? But yeah, if just mailing the ballot applications could be compulsory, I think, I understand that you wouldn't necessarily be able to reach all of the eligible voters, but I don't think we should say, well, let's not try to reach some eligible voters if we can't reach all of them, because as it stands, very few are getting a chance to participate.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a very, very good point, Stacy. Glenn?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that really I don't think the city clerk and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment folks can say, but I can, because I'm a neighborhood council person. And that is that some of the things that are being discussed here are really a function of the decisions that are made by the city council and the mayor. And we as neighborhood councils, that is our role, is to help effectuate change in those levels. So for example, the definition of a stakeholder, although it's in the charter as persons who live, work, and own property, and it would require a city charter change, there is a additional wording that was put in from the plan, which is ordinance, which is city council can change. So just be aware you can effectuate change with, you know, varying levels of difficulty with regards to who is a stakeholder based on the law, changing the charter. And then secondly, with regards to the resources available for these different ideas of getting word out to potential voters, we also have the ability to communicate with our elected officials. The city clerk and the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment get the money that city council and the mayor provide to them, and then they have to figure out how can they do what they do within that money that they get. I have never ever heard in the history of the system that they had more money, that they, you know, and the issue is, oh, we have too much money. You know, that's never been the case. So they get a certain allocation and they have to figure out how can they best get the job done based on that money. But we have the power to advocate for the priorities that we may want to put forward for both city clerk, which is running the elections, and then done, which is the outreach component. So I just want to put that out there and back on to the neighborhood council folks. You can get this on your agenda of your neighborhood council. You could file a community impact statement, and you can advocate with your elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Glenn. You're absolutely right. When it's time for us to go before committee to discuss our budget and to request funds for our various programs, that is an opportunity for you to support us. And usually what we do is we try to share that council file number. I know that's something that our partners at Dunn does as well. And you can follow that council file. And when it's time for our budgets to be heard before committee, before it even gets to council, that is an opportunity for you to submit those CIS and come out and support why you feel we should receive the funding that we're requesting and why it's so important and crucial for your community. So thank you for that, Glenn. That's
Renee, this is Tom Soon here. Do you mind if I say a quick word on that?
Please do.
No, Glenn, thank you for that comment. I do also, John, this is to John Darnell. I do want to acknowledge our, I know this is for the city clerk election, but I do want to acknowledge that Anne-Marie Holman, our public information officer, is here as well. I want to make sure she gets an introduction. So John, we're not going to take up more of your time, Renee, but just want to make sure that she's acknowledged. And John, if you want to promote her to panel, so people could see her. But just to Renee, to your point, I think I was looking in the chat, Josh Stuckman mentioned in the chat, because we talked about general awareness, that he mentioned his council has about 40,000 stakeholders and the US bulk estimate rate is 37,000. So with that being said, if we do the math of the numbers there, it's going to cost almost over 2 million to do a general wide mass mailing. So if that's one reason why we don't do it, we see the cost of it. Ideally, we could try. But later on, I can mention a survey that we're trying to do, an email survey later on. But just want to then thank you for your feedback. And Renee, thank you for the opportunity to speak on that a little bit. Thank you. And there's Anne-Marie. Hi, Anne-Marie.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
Hello. Thank you for having me and for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate that. And thank you for those comments, Tom. I really appreciate it. And to everyone, you know, this is some good dialogue and some good feedback. And we definitely have a lot to take back to our teams to discuss. So anyone else for vote by mail before we move on? Any last thoughts? Okay.
Hey, Renee, this is John.
Yes, John.
So I'm John Darnell with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. You know, I just wanted to thank you again because I know this was a very unique election and the first time that you had done vote by mail with documentation, and normally it's done in person. So I think that's a part that you know, there was going to be things that were going to move a little slow, but at the same time it was because it's just difficult to do it with a pandemic. So So thank your department for being as responsive as you could and trying to deal with all the issues you could with, staffing shortages and having a pandemic, and then having the vote by mail, include the candidates that needed to provide, I'm sorry, the voters that needed to provide documentation, because before it had only been self-affirmation where you just fill out a form, you send it in and you get your ballot. It's like, really quick, and it's a quick turnaround like that. So thank you, Renee, and the rest of your staff.
Well, thank you. And again, we thank you as well, because we know that you were a great asset to us in, administering those elections, and all the support that your team gave us throughout that election season was really great. And you guys are just such great partners, and I look forward to working with you guys in the future. So thank you for that. Glenn, you have another comment?
I just wanted to ask if maybe I know there's several more topics that we wanted to cover, and we can certainly continue the Q&A until the end of the session, but I want to make sure we do at least cover all of the topics. Thank you.
Will do. Okay, so moving on. Next, let's focus on the election day challenge process. The feedback received for the election day challenges were as follows. Increase the time candidates have to respond to challenges, as gathering evidence can take time. Recruit prior NC board members as panelists to utilize their knowledge and experience of NC elections, and clarify what can and cannot be challenged to avoid confusion or gray areas in the process. So our office will take a look at the election timeline during the off season to determine if the time to respond to election day challenges can be extended. We will work with the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to reach out to former NC board members to see if they're interested in serving as independent grievance panelists. And like with the candidate challenges, we will clarify and expand on what is and what is not considered an election day challenge. So if you would like to provide feedback or recommendations for this topic, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are using your phone. Okay, up first, it looks like we have Cherry. Cherry, go ahead. Or Sherry, am I saying that right?
Yes, this is Sherry Garahunting. Can you hear me?
I can, Sherry. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I had the opportunity to run for Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council, and the I was challenged by my candidacy. I was challenged when I won the election, and I was challenged continuously at every single board meeting of the Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council. And I chose to resign because I didn't want to be in such a hostile environment. So my question to you is, if I was given a challenge by email at like Thursday at noon, and I was given till 5 p.m. Friday to respond, and I work full time, and I'm able to write a very comprehensive explanation to the challenge and supporting information. But I don't think 24 to 28 hours is enough time for most people to provide information to fight the challenge. That's number one. Number two, I was told by the NEA, which was Gibson, Nyambura for Porter Ranch area, that each person on the board has an opportunity to make a challenge 3 times within a 12-month period. There were 2 or 3 individuals that were challenging me, taking turns challenging me. And that would mean that I would be challenged 9 possible times. And the challenges were brought. The city clerk confirmed that I was able to be in the election, a candidate. A challenge was brought again. The Dunn people or whoever it went to, I said, please check with the city clerk. I've already, addressed this issue, and so on and so forth, to the point where when 3 challenges come and the first one was already, put down or I won the challenge, the fact that two other times, and in open PRNC meetings, these people were allowed to go on and on and on, even with the NEA present. I think it's hyenas. I think that you don't have enough oversight. And if you can't keep the people on the on any neighborhood council in line and set them straight about challenges, there was one that was so ridiculous. There was 5 openings and I was the 5th highest candidate that got the 5th highest votes. That council even tried to say, well, she resigned, let's just put the 6th person in. I mean, it was just one ridiculous thing after another. So I want to know how you're going to address that for the next election.
Thank you, Sherry, for your comments. Tom, did you want to speak on that?
Hi, Sherry. There was 2. I know what you're referring to. I think there was 2 processes regarding your stakeholder challenges. The first process is when during the election period, the city clerk has their own stakeholder qualification, and that's the one. That's the one challenge period. Now, if you get back on the board, each neighbor, because we had a situation where stakeholders were doing the verifications, but then who do you trust, etc. Then our department came up with a process to allow board members or stakeholders to challenge a board member stakeholdership. Right, like they have 3 times to do it in the process. So there's 2 separate processes that you're speaking of. One is, I think, the city clerk's process to verify candidacy. And then after that, yes, neighborhood council, board members, or stakeholders can use our verification process to verify stakeholdership. And I see, Sherry, do you want to, I don't know who's going to, Sherry, go ahead.
Yes, I guess the point I'm making is I've been in the neighborhood council system off and on 3 different neighborhood councils since 2013. Because you have too many allowances, it's almost like you give the people the opportunity to challenge and they don't take the challenge, it's not enforced properly, they don't get the message. You lost a very, very good neighborhood council board member. I'm involved in so many organizations, I would have 5 or 6 neighborhood councils I could run under, but I chose that one because that was the first neighborhood council I was in and I enjoyed it. And it was very meaningful during the Porter Ranch Aliso Canyon gas leak. At this point, it gave such a sour taste in my mouth. I don't think I ever want to run for neighborhood council office again. I don't want to even go to a meeting. The only reason I'm here is because I heard there's this session here. It just doesn't seem right that you allow these board members to willy-nilly challenge people and they don't take no for an answer. So that's my feedback. And I'm very sorry that you guys can't get it together to protect people who actually are stakeholders and are being harassed. So that's it.
Sherry, thank you for the feedback. I'll totally take that feedback back to our team. Thank you, Sherry. And I apologize for the bad experience that this caused for you.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I see Glenn's hand, but I don't know if you.
Yes.
I'll turn it back to you, Renee.
Yes. Glenn, please.
Yes, I wanted to maybe comment in general, not about a specific situation, and perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, and if there's any validity to any of these points, you can consider them for going forward. First of all, when candidates initially file and the city clerk reviews the documentation as to the eligibility of the candidate, the city clerk does not investigate the veracity of those documents. You take them at face value. So that's number one point of, that you can confirm or not. And then there is a candidate challenge period at that point that was referenced just now during the candidate filing period and for a period shortly thereafter. And presumably if a candidate was deemed to have been ineligible, they would been so found and not even on the ballot. But again, part of the issue is, is the documentation, well, anyway, like I said, face value as far as that. Then when it gets to the, after the election is held and there's a challenge period for post-election, at that point, that then is determined whether it's challengeable or not, and then it then goes to the review boards for consideration. And if the documentation on its face appeared to be adequate at the time of the candidate filing, the review board then can't do anything about it. However, if the circumstances have changed, and let's say a candidate lived within the boundaries of running for a residency, they had to be a resident, and they were no longer a resident by the time of the election itself, then or the results of the election, then that's referred to the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment to work with the neighborhood council, because that then moves it out of the election process into the neighborhood council process, including the grievance process. So maybe if you want to comment, say if anything I said was inaccurate or you need to amplify on, and is there anything that could possibly could or should be done to make it better for future years? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. No, we're taking the feedback. I don't want to back on that. That's good feedback.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. Everything you stated, Glenn, was correct. And again, Sherry, I do apologize for that experience. And we definitely need to look at what we can do differently so that, someone can go through that challenge process without feeling attacked and targeted. And there's never an excuse for that. And so, again, I apologize for that, that bad experience. The thing with the challenge response time, what we have experienced over many elections is that oftentimes, because let's just say this, the challenge period is a 5-day process. Unfortunately, the unofficial results come out usually either on the last day of the challenge process or that day prior. And what we found is that folks tend to wait to see if the individual that they would like to challenge was elected to the board before submitting that challenge. And once those unofficial results come out, and if it looks like that candidate is going to be elected, that is generally when we find that folks will then submit a challenge. And that ends up being closer to, either the last day of the challenge period or that day prior. And so that is usually why the time period to respond is so short. If someone was to submit the challenge on the very first day, day one, then essentially that the respondent could potentially have up to 5, maybe 6 days to respond. And so that's what the issue is there. And we have to kind of take a look at that a little bit more closely to see what is it that we can do about that. Again, as far as documentation, yes, we receive documentation, we take a look at it, and we do look at it at face value. Sometimes it may require for us to do maybe some search on the internet or a little bit more to maybe try to gather information. But for the most part, yes, we do take that documentation at face value. And so our determinations are generally made based upon that. And if someone has information to dispute the documentation that we did receive, then of course we will also take a look at that. And that has happened in cases as well. And so we just have to really take it on a case-by-case basis. Okay. All right. I don't think I see any more hands. So if we can move on then to, let's see, where are we now? So we are at the tally process and the unofficial and official election results. So here are some of the comments we received regarding the tally and election results. The live stream tally was well received, but however, stakeholders did not have a clear view of ballots and did not know which NC ballots were being tabulated. And some NCs suggested we include additional election data on the election results report, such as number of voters and ballot totals. So during the previous NC elections tallies, observers had about the same view of the ballots of where the cameras were positioned. So if live streaming the tally is required in 2023, hopefully not, but if so, we will consider the camera angle and we will announce which ballots are being tallied so folks will know which ballots are being tallied at that time. We'll also work with our systems team to determine if we're able to add voter and ballot information on our official election results report. That's something we can work with them with, and you know, something we may possibly be able to do from my understanding. So we will open the floor for comments and feedback on this topic. You can press the raise hand feature or the *9 if you're using your phone. So do we have any comments about the tally or election results? Okay. Going once, going twice. Yes, Glenn.
Okay, well, just so we have some conversation.
Okay.
So some of the feedback, these are good points you just raised. I heard those as well. Is there any, so I think you present the first preliminary results, I think on the Monday or the Tuesday after the election?
Yeah, about 6 or 7 days out, yes.
Yeah, so Monday or Tuesday. I realize this may not be relevant for future years if we're not all vote by mail. But since, as it turns out, I think most of the ballots all came in you know, by the day after the election day, is my understanding. Have you considered doing like a preliminary number 1 and a preliminary number 2? And again, it wouldn't matter if we go back to in person, you count the ballots the next day, and then we do have something the next day. But if there's a vote by mail component, then we'd have the same issue of a delay. So I think, the bottom line is that people kind of like to have a preliminary idea as soon as possible, even recognizing that there's more ballots potentially out there to be counted. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that, Glenn. No, that's totally valid. That is something we definitely could look at if we're able to produce, you know, like a next day preliminary results, and then maybe go to our go back to our traditional schedule of a second unofficial election results, and then of course the final. Yeah, I think that's something we could definitely take a look at. Because folks would definitely be interested in that. And we did receive the majority of our voted ballots during the period of election day up into the unofficial results. So there were some NCs that saw very little to no change in their unofficial results versus their official results, because we did release that out, you know, several days out. So that's something we can definitely take a look at with our post-election processes. So very good. Thank you for that, Glenn. Okay, so looks like we have no other raised hands. So, okay, everyone. So we just want to thank you all for attending this feedback session. You all gave us great recommendations and feedback, and we had a very robust discussion, and we appreciate you all as always. So the city clerk will be recruiting individuals in the next few months to participate in an NC election work group to discuss and find solutions to these challenges that were faced in the 2021 Neighborhood Council election cycle. NC election work group meetings will take place between January and April of 2022. Neighborhood Council board members and stakeholders age 16 and older are invited to participate. All participants must complete an online application and be available to attend all meetings. So the NC election work group will discuss the NC bylaws, the election timeline, which is something I know we've talked about at great lengths today, the candidate filing process, the challenge process, of course, vote by mail, which is a big topic, and then election day operations, as we will probably be revisiting some of those 2019, some of those issues that came out of the 2019 elections for the at poll, for the traditional app polls. We'll kind of take a look at that, since we are hoping, fingers crossed, that for 2023, we will be allowed to go back out and vote in polling places. So if you are interested in participating in the NC election work group, you can apply online at our website. The information is already up. You can see that on the screen. And the deadline to submit an application is Friday, October 29th at 5 p.m. So you have about a month, to decide if it's something that you want to be a part of and get an application to us. We're looking for a small group of folks, and somewhere usually between 20 to 25. And we make sure that we, we make sure that that group is made up of a diverse group of NC stakeholders. So we do select stakeholders in all 12 regions. We usually try to have a representation of at least 2 each. And we go from folks that have a lot of experience with NC elections, such as Glenn Bailey, versus folks that may be new to the system. And we try to take a look at, the stakeholder type, making sure we have, representations for stakeholders who live, work, own property, and our community interest stakeholders. So please be on the lookout for that. So as always, the city clerk strives to provide outstanding NC elections every cycle. We do recognize you are familiar with the needs of your community and want to obtain your input to ensure we continue working on inclusivity and making improvements to your elections. So at this point, I think we still have a little bit of time, so maybe we can open the floor again for any other questions or feedback you have, or if our colleagues at the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, or maybe Anne Marie would like to provide some information, we can do that at this time.
So I did promise a generic anything we didn't cover time. We've got 8 minutes left.
Okay.
So, but if there's an important, timely announcements by, the department or anyone else, please, let's do that. But yeah. Thank you.
Well, sorry, Glenn. Yeah, this is John Darnell with Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. Just want to give a friendly reminder to all the board members that are present. You have until April 1st to submit the changes to your bylaws. So if there is any changes that you want to put in there as far as elections go, or anything else, the deadline to submit that to our department is April 1st. So you do have some time, but I just want to give you a friendly reminder about that deadline. Thank you.
John, thanks so much. And I do want to remind everyone, please look at your position descriptions in your bylaws and compare them with your attachment B. Sometimes there's difficulty when the city clerk has to make a determination when there's inconsistency there. And then I've also heard from some neighborhood councils that they were concerned about the community interest stakeholders. So just look at the eligibility for both running and voting, and you can make a decision. You're only required to have one position that includes community interest stakeholders, and some neighborhood councils include 100% of their positions are there, and some only have that one. So those are issues to deal with during your bylaws, but must be done before that deadline that John indicated. Thank you.
If I could have, this is Tom Soon, Neighborhood Empowerment, and if I could have a quick 30 seconds, and Emery, if you have a few things to add, just to go back to the city clerk's working group, to answer a question in the chat. Yes, it will be announced out in the October monthly profile, and the NEAs. We're gonna have the NEAs to help also push it out to your neighborhood councils as well. So please get the word out there. So thank you for doing that. Also, know a couple of things is that, as Renee mentioned earlier, regarding the engagement and outreach, there's many things we could talk about outreach, but this session's for the logistics of neighborhood councils. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that we will be putting out citywide elections awareness, awareness, general and awareness survey, targeting over almost 1 million emails. Wow, so that could be more information to be sent out with that. Regarding the bylaws, everyone knows here that the bylaws period to amend bylaws is now, and it ends on April the 1st. So we will be working closely with city clerk staff and our NEAs to get your bylaws and make those recommendations. So we'll have it by April the 1st. So then we won't have any more bylaw confusion for the next elections in 2023, whether it's all in person or online, etc. But then I just want to say to Renee and Michael, and then Renee and Nathan too, but at least especially to Renee and Michael, and to this past year's election process, most like also to John and to our NEAs, we just really enjoyed and thank you for this partnership. It's we'll call it the COVID election. We survived it. Okay, so thank you. Much more work to do, but I just want to say thank you for that. So I don't know if you want to say a few words, and I know we have to wrap up. Hey, Glenn, thank you for always keeping us on our toes. For being involved in the process. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Glenn is right that about the council file that he just mentioned in the chat is related to neighborhood council election bylaws. So please check out council file 21-0407 if you have not already. We're also going to have the link to that file in a follow-up packet that we are sending. It was the deeper dive that was promised during the election feedback sessions that we held recently. We will be sharing that with all neighborhood council members as well as everyone who signed up for those sessions. It'll include action steps on things that would help address some of the things that people had asked us about during the feedback session, as well as information on the council file that Glenn was just talking about, 210407.
And I think with that, maybe we'll turn back to Renee. And I think, John, we have a little survey thing for the attendees here too. So I'll turn it back to you guys.
Okay. John, you want to talk about the survey?
Yeah, so in the chat, I just put, I posted it a couple of times, but we have a workshop evaluation link here as well. And then there's the networking lounge link. And then there's a link to all the upcoming rooms and sessions available there. So yeah, so if anyone wants to click on those to fill that out, we'd appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So for our attendees, any of you have any last bit of feedback you want to provide, or comments, or anything you want to say? I think we have about 2 minutes. Are we at 2 minutes, 11:45?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So, we all know that this election season has been very challenging for us. In July of last year, we were still moving forward with conducting at-poll elections for the 2021 NC elections. And once the numbers started to rise for COVID-19, we had to quickly pivot to trying to decide, or pivoting to a plan where we can still conduct these elections for you all, but do so in a manner that would keep all of you safe. And so we came up with the plan to conduct all of these elections by vote by mail, which Glenn mentioned earlier, has never been done before. We've perhaps, I know we've done vote by mail for subdivisions. We had other, prior elections where we did do some vote by mail for just self-affirmation, but this was definitely unprecedented to do all vote by mail for up to all 99 NC elections and neighborhood councils, and having a very short amount of time to do that. We had only about 4 or 5 months to try to put together a vote by mail portal that we would normally take us about a year to do that. And so we definitely had to scramble and just pivot and try to get these elections up and running where we could still, make them successful and provide them for you all. And so it was a tall feat, but I must say that along the way, all of you, jumped in where you could and made it happen. It was not something we were able to do alone. And so for my colleagues at the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, for all of the NCs and just the community at large, all came together to make these happen and played a part in them all being successful. And so we could not have done it without you all, and I thank you, and we take your feedback very serious, because again, these are your elections. We want them to be successful, and your experience is what matters. As administrators, we can run them how we think they should be run, but ultimately your experience is what is important to us. And so thank you for everything, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the events that'll be taking place at the Congress today.
So I want to thank, on behalf of the Congress Planning Committee, it was my pleasure to facilitate the session. We will have lunch and learn, and we also have the exhibitor fair going on now, various city departments and other entities. So take advantage of that in addition to the workshop. So thank you for attending this year's Congress, and I'm sure we'll see many of you between now and the next year's Congress. And this session is recorded, as all of them are, and they'll be available for your viewing for overlapping or ones you missed. So thank you all very much. Thanks to our partners, City Clerk, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, and to all of you for attending this session.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Don't forget the NC work group.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.